Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mentors. Right now, we're continuing our interview with Jordan Paris, and last we left off, we were talking about how Jordan's network introduced him to more people. And if you'd like a neatly laid out format for Jordan's podcasting and networking knowledge, there's a free resource article titled Contacts, Emails, and Research, Oh My, a beginner's podcast bundle, waiting for you in the bio below. Let's jump back into the interview. Yeah. Well, I think that's because, having a village is extremely helpful. And you created a great village where you said, hey, I'm, this young up and coming podcaster. I really want to interview these people. You, like looking at someone, you're absolutely amazing. Can I talk with you? And, you can but you can have that surrounding platform and people just want to help you, introduce you to more people. And then after a certain point, now you're the person that's helping others. Now you're the person who has that good platform and you're like, oh, cool. Like now I can help introduce. Now I have friends. Like, because again, like you said, in your relationship with Grant Cardone, you're like, oh, it's not exactly there yet. But, you always want to develop those. So you get to that point where, you and Grant are like, good friends. And you can make for others.
And the way that happens is like I like to the long-term goal, and I've started doing it, is just converting these remote interviews and parlaying them into in-person interviews down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'll do an in-person interview with Grant, and we'll see if we can become friends. I don't know if I'll like him or in person or not, I don't know if we'll like each other, but we're both very annoying in our own ways, so I don't know.
Oh goodness. I don't know. I haven't seen much of his work. I've always been kind of curious because you hear about 10x all the time. But yeah, and in terms of you bring up a lot of stats, statistics, even in just the conversation. You do a lot of research, and that's something I'm really curious about. Is when you have these guests you're about to interview, what is that research process that you do? Like, is it a ritual? Do you have certain questions? Is there certain things that you're looking for? And how do you translate that over into an episode?
Yeah, it's a good question because I do a lot of research. Thanks for recognizing that. And
absolutely.
One of the first things I do is I go to Spotify, and because they have a really good search function where I can look up Ava Wetrick and then see all podcast episodes, and then see every podcast that you've ever been a guest on.
Oh, wow.
And it's very helpful in that way. And so I'll just queue them up, and because I like to listen in this really weird app called Radio Public. I'm the only one that uses it. Okay. So I like to find them in there to like listen to them later. So I'll listen to a bunch of podcasts that they've been on, and I'll know the places not to go, like the things that they talk about all the time. But a lot of times, Ava, when I'm reaching out to someone, I already have in mind like something specific that I want to learn from them, something I really want to hone in on over the whole episode. So, and those, like, for example, I got two examples here, like, this physicist that's all about cannabis, and obviously like there's a natural line of questions that comes from like just figuring out cannabis. So that was like the easiest interview to prepare for ever, because that was the only thing we were supposed to talk about. It's the only thing I wanted to talk about, and there was a lot of things I wanted to know. So I just had all these questions, and then someone else, I wanted them on the podcast because this is not your average coach. Like, this person has like an extremely scalable coaching business where she doesn't really have to do a ton of fulfillment on the product service. Like, and she's my age, and she's absolutely crushing it, approaching like millions of dollars per year, and she's just, I've never seen anyone do coaching better than her. And the best part about it, she makes so much money for her clients. Like, I have seen, and she shows people all the time. Yeah, it's really great. So I wanted to talk to her about that.
How do you do that?
About her whole business model and and how do you do that? So, but then I'll just listen to podcasts typically with the person, and I'll just jot down a bunch of notes, like bullet points, short. have them in my notes on my phone, and then I'll transfer them on my computer here to Microsoft OneNote, and that's where and then I have another computer set up here with Microsoft OneNote open, and I just, because I make questions out of the notes, I'll be, in the podcast a lot of times, as a podcaster, as an interviewer, as a questioner myself, they won't ask the question that you like, the host won't ask the question that you're like praying for them to like ask. It's hard to explain, but I don't know. I just like the guest says something and it makes you wonder, and then they never get to it. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I'll ask them about that. And then I put all these bullet points, make them into questions, put them in a logical order. And really the idea though, the best podcasts, you throw that whole list out. You ask the first question, and the first question lasts the whole episode. Those are my favorite.
Yeah, to where it just becomes a really interesting conversation. And as everything kind of blossoms out of curiosity.
Kind of like my podcast with you almost 2 years ago.
Like, oh my God. That was seriously one of the most fun episodes. One of the most fun interviews I think I had, because we just kept talking.
I know. It was an hour and a half.
Oh my, really? Mm-hmm. Goodness. We were, popping off. But yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. And I think the research process is so important, because I know in past content you've created that you have a sense of pride where you're like, hey, I ask really cool questions because I do a lot of research and I do a lot of digging. Yeah. So I was super curious on, what that research process looked like. Because some people can just, look up a few articles, or maybe you just check out their LinkedIn profile. So you're only going to get so you're only going to get like the shallow questions, right? Yeah. Which is nothing bad, because sometimes it's the first introduction an audience has to a guest. So maybe it's a good thing to ask, like, hey, what are you doing? And you go deeper after that.
But look, website too. I don't read every guest's book, but because that's just not really reality. But some of them, and sometimes I just like, I just get it. I'm not going to have the whole thing read by then. This book I'm holding up now, Back to Human, but I have it, and I page through it for now until I get to reading it later, because I've been on the same book for like 6 months. It's like 600 pages.
Oh my, what book is it? Robert Greene?
Yes.
Yeah. Human Nature, or
Small Text. Human Nature.
Oh goodness.
And I'm going to do 48 Laws of Power next, so it's going to be a year of Robert Greene straight.
I think I'll share with you later. I think I have a bit of a tactic that might be able to help you out in terms of reading. Like, I've been able to tear through a book a week through this tactic that I've discovered.
How's your retention?
Honestly, really well, because I've been able to pair it with journaling. Because if you read a book really fast, you can take away only so much from it. But if you take the time to pause and really listen to a chapter, you're like, whoa, now let's apply it to my life. And that's that's a whole journaling process. And then you can go back into a next chapter. It's been really insightful and really interesting. Yeah,
I can see how the writing part of it definitely boosts the retention.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting the amount of knowledge you can acquire really fast. That's been my favorite part of the college experience. Is just being able to read my own books, right? Because in the background you have everything's filled with books. I can see Tim Ferriss. I saw Grant Cardone. I can see, it's hard to tell. Tim Ferriss is also there.
Manson.
Mark Manson. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you, the most that I've ever gotten out of books was when I first started reading as a 17-year-old, and from 17 to 19, I have the notebooks up, leaning against the wall there.
Oh yeah, okay.
I wrote a lot of notes on every book that I read. Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within has 40 full pages of notes. And the books that I took these notes on, I got the most out of, unsurprisingly. And I don't take notes anymore. Haven't for 3 years. I highlight, and it has been helpful where I go back and reference something where I something pops up in my head and or something's applicable to my life, and I'll go back and reference it. It's happened a number of times with Robert Greene's book already, and I'm not even done, but
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's going to be so cool. You have that notebook for years and you can just like, plop that down on your kid's desk one day and be like, hey, this is what I did when I was 17. Take a look here. See what's popping. I found journaling to be really, really helpful. And I always make sure to write things down because you remember it a lot better. Do you know why, like, you've transitioned away from journaling when it comes to obtaining, like, just reading?
Yeah, I'm just lazy. There's no other way to say it. I mean, I don't have an excuse. Like I just don't. I'm trying to like manufacture one right now. And I can't even think of something. It's just me.
Well, I mean, it depends. Like, it depends on how much of your mental energy is going into every one thing. You know what I mean?
You know what it is? Okay,
Mm.
I remember. In 2018, yes, it was 2018. Wow, that's crazy. Did the Goodreads reading challenge to track how many books I read that year. And I had a goal of like 20 something and I ended up reading 31 books that year. There's a side effect to that. It was gamified. And so I was just trying to get through as many books as possible. And I'd find myself rushing and just I couldn't wait to finish a book. That's why now in 2018 it was cool to see that 31 books. I got to brag about it. I got to be subtly pretentious about it. And then 2019 I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not. So it's like, okay, I'm okay that I've been reading The Laws of Human Nature since August, like it's totally, I don't really care. Because I'm not tracking the number anymore. So I've thought about just consolidating everything. I don't know if that's the right word, but just taking a pause on reading and just going through all these books that I've already read and already made highlights in, and just literally writing about it. Which is so great that you do that. Just press and pause and shoring up on the things I learned from that, going through them again. Because I think doing that for a whole year, going through all the books that I previously read, I think it would be way more beneficial than reading 12 new books. Now, you can't go through old books that you've already read every single year, because then you end up learning nothing new. But I think one full year of that, I think it would be really beneficial. When am I going to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's so many books that you can really take away from. Like, some books can impact you. Like, you're like, oh, like that was cool to learn this, for this month or this couple weeks. But there's some books that can really, really hit home with you and really impact, how you see the world or how you see yourself and how to grow and improve yourself or your vision of the world.
Yeah,
and those are the ones that you should. Those are the ones that are super important to come back to.
yeah. I wonder though, like what The Laws of Human Nature is like making, how that's impacting my life.
Mm-hmm.
As you're kind of posing this question, the ones that really impact you. How I'm trying not to become like a manipulative piece of shit. Like
Robert Greene can make you accidentally be that really fast. I'll tell you that much. It's a little scary. It's in the wrong hands. The books that he's created can be really, really dangerous.
Yeah, because like the thing I value most is kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure I'm not, especially with doing 48 Laws of Power next, supposedly, I don't want to cross that boundary. I still want to be like a really kind person. That's what I want to be known as.
Yeah, I have been able to just like read a few chapters or listen to a few chapters of both books. And I mean, it's a scary thing. Like, and especially to the immature mind, I'm not gonna lie, like it's super appealing. There was a kid I didn't even know who I was like, I glanced over across the table and was like, are you reading 48 Laws of Power? And he's like, yeah, I just dove into it. Like, how do you know? And I was like, okay, just know, like, that's a great book, but like use that knowledge to, use what you remember for good. And he was telling me a completely different story where he was like, no, like I want to learn how to, like, how to essentially just control people. I think manipulation is important. I was like, dude, like that's not what it's about.
It's not.
And from Robert Greene, I think the biggest thing you can take away is, of course, like you can definitely learn how to become an evil person. You can definitely learn how to control people, or you can you can know how to spot it and utilize it for good.
Yeah.
So instead of like, again, like negotiation, a lot of people can think is, manipulation, but it's not. You want the best outcome for both people. And while you have an agenda and you want something, right, you're not going to deliberately tear someone else apart or tear someone down in order to get it. You know what I mean?
Right. Is it like, is it like beneficial to both parties? Maybe. It could be.
Yeah, to where it could be beneficial for both parties, or just like no one gets hurt. Robert Greene does an interesting job of saying, hey, you can either do this or you can spot when it's happening and try to avoid it. And that's what some of the takeaways for me were, especially with human nature, because a big topic he has in the very middle is narcissism.
Yeah, that's my favorite section. Yeah, and I'm a full-blown narcissist. People don't know my internal thoughts. Everyone tells me like, no, you're not, Jordan, but it's like, you don't even know. Like, I'm just such a piece of crap.
But well, you learn so much, and especially like, again, there's the term sociopath and psychopath have been such a predominant term recently. And when you dive into that research, everyone kind of is like, oh my God, like I think I might be a sociopath or psychopath.
Yeah. That's what, like a lot of, there are certain things that I read in the laws of human nature that I'm like, yeah, that describes me.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are all my symptoms. And so it does make me a lot of things make me question myself in there.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be a really interesting, after you finish that book, it's going to be really interesting to see like, what you want to do with that knowledge afterwards. Because I'll read books like that, and it's like I can start pinpointing all of my friends or people that I'm around, and I'm like, whoa, like that person I know does this person I know does that. Some of them could be good habits, and some of them could be really bad traits. So then you just have to decide for yourself, like, well, what do I want to do with this knowledge and information, and how do I want to change that or enhance that?
I think where it comes from for me, and the reason I started reading about human nature in general and communication, one of my favorite books, Captivate, the Science of Succeeding with People by Vanessa Van Edwards, one of my superheroes, a social superhero. And the reason I started on that path of learning all that, it's my favorite thing to learn. Because going back to like the start of this episode, like I had one friend in high school, and I was so like, depression and isolation it distorts it to the point where it seems so much worse than it actually is, and it's just almost unbearable. And so I just knew I needed friends, and I think, and now and Captivate really helped me do that. And there's really nothing that you can use in there that could like hurt people. There just isn't. That's just a book about like, it's just an awesome book. I love it. It's the science of how to win friends and influence people. That's exactly what it is. And that's, I think she even says that too in a podcast interview that she did a while ago, because that was one of her favorite books. So it's kind of the inspiration for this one. And because like, there's no science in how to win friends and influence people. There's anecdotal stories, and it's awesome. And there's a reason it's a classic book, but I just got off on this one so much because it's the science of it. But now with the laws of human nature, I feel like it's more, it still comes from that need of friends, and maybe even dark side of it, attention. And it's me like, not wanting to control people, but just wanting to have a grasp of my relationships, and being able to read between the lines and know what's going on and where I stand and where they stand. And so in a roundabout way, control, but not in like the way that we were talking about earlier of like manipulation, but just having a firm grasp of my relationships. I don't know. I think that's why I've dived into that book. It's still that insecurity a little bit from high school.
In terms of just like empathy alone, I can empathize with that, and I think everyone can. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to people that you want to make sure you have a good standing with, right? You are going to want to toggle and find out as many ways as possible and reaffirm yourself as like, is this a good relationship? Am I your friend? Do you think I'm your friend? Is this going well? Is this conversation good? Please don't hate me. I want to make sure that you really don't hate me. And I'm going to try everything possible to seem impressive or kind or nice in order for you to get to like me, because I really hope that you do. I think everyone can really relate to that and experience that.
Well, as you mentioned being impressive, I impressing people is almost like the need to impress people is almost like a form of neediness.
Mm-hmm.
It's this overcompensation, and I feel like a lot of my life the past few years has just been this need to impress. It's been like just because of that bad high school experience, like I've had this need to prove people wrong, and just like I just overcompensated to the max. And and it's worked, and we see where my life is right now as a 22-year-old. Like it's great, and it's going to continue to be great. And I'm not speaking for him, but I plan on talking about this with Dan Schaubel. But he's talked about this on numerous podcasts, how very similar experience, being bullied in high school, which I actually did experience too. And, they're just being bullied in school all these years. And his 20s were just this massive overcompensation and just this need to success and by extension really impress. And I get all the time, like one of the number one things I get from like peers and people in our space, Ava, is like, you're so impressive. Like this is so impressive, about like what I do. And I'm like, I really don't aim to impress I don't want to aim to impress anymore. That's a sign that I'm like, that I'm not on the mark. If all I do is impress, I'm really not doing too well. I need to like it needs to actually inspire, to use a cliche word. I'd rather inspire than impress. Impressing people is useless.
Yeah. It sounds like you are wanting to come down to the level of authenticity.
Yeah.
To where, and again, like in full vulnerability and full transparency, I'm very guilty of the same thing. And it was painful to hear the other day, a friend of mine, he, like, for a school project, he was going to be doing like a mini documentary over my life, and he was talking to his mom about it, and his mom was present in the room. And he said a line that really hurt me, because it was painfully, like, it's what I've seen throughout my life. And he said, a lot of adults see Ava as a child, and her peers see her as an object, and and that's the premise of this. And I've never thought about it like that. I've never seen myself as that, but it really rung true. And I was like, oh shit, this is why I feel the need to impress, and this is why I feel the need to overcompensate, is because I want to be seen as a human being, and as a person that has done things with my life, and not just some kid, or not just some like, you should look at this little pretty little girl, look at you, do your thing. Like, I've been so against that I'll always try to interject the fact that no, I'm a thinking, breathing person, and I can talk, and I have these abilities, and maybe you don't, but I'm gonna let you know otherwise. So yeah, like it's such and I'm glad that you kind of come to these realizations, and I'm glad that you want to strive for this authenticity, because as what I've been learning is that's where the real impact is. That's where the real value comes from. Yeah. And that's when you can really start to see the benefits and the fruits of your labor, when people come to you and they can say, like, Jordan Paris has impacted my life in a beautiful way because he's been loving, or because he's been kind, or because he's been a great friend, or because, he did this one interview and he asked this one question that I've always wanted to ask this guest, right? Like, it can go off in a plethora of ways. And I'm glad that, because we're all learning, we're all growing, you've taken the time to be like, dang, like, this is what I want for myself, and I want to start heading off in this direction.
Yeah. I was going to say, but yeah, thank you, Ava. Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Appreciate that.
No, of course.
Even like by extension too, like this episode I have coming out about coaching with my good friend Lauren Tickner, that I was talking about, that I referenced earlier. Like, I really think the ripple effect of that episode, in terms of making a lot of money for a lot of people over the next few years once that episode comes out, I really do think it's going to be spectacular. Like, I want to be able to do that for people rather than just impress. Like, have an actual, like a real, I hate this word so much,
You're gonna
impact.
say, yeah, there you go.
So I hate that word, man.
I know the English dictionary, we're not that good at it, but it's true. But it's true. This might be an interesting question because I know you talk a lot about how what's it called, sponsorships. You're like, oh, I didn't really go for sponsorships. I went for creating a business for my podcast. And what is the impact you've seen from that? Rather than just doing sponsorships, what is the impact you've seen about creating like a business? And you're going out and you basically now you just do a lot of podcast consulting where you're like, well, now I help everyone else with their stuff. What is the process like there? What have you seen grow from that?
Well, I mean, it's just a fulfilling business model that I like am in control of. Whereas like a sponsorship, like I'm not 100% in control of. If say you have 15,000 listeners every single episode, you put out an episode every single week, you have a sponsor every single week, and they pay you $30 per 1,000 impressions, which is like pretty average. It's between $15 and $45. So 30 is pretty fair to say. $15 and $40, I think. I forget, but so $30 per 1,000 impressions, and you make $23,400 per year. Like that sucks. And what if they don't re-up? What if they don't like something you said? It's hard to track leads. Like, what if they're not getting enough leads directly from your podcast? So it's just really not a winning business model. The winning business model has been building a business around my podcast. And, obviously a marketing and production agency for podcasters. People come to me for me, and it doesn't, like, this business doesn't work without my own successful podcast. And there's a lot that goes into that, but yeah, it's just a lot of fun. My world is like podcasts as it stands now. Who knows what it'll be 10 years from now, because I anticipate the landscape of this industry will change a lot, potentially disappear. Who knows? You never know. And I'm ready for that. I'll just it'll parlay right into the next thing.
Yeah, no. And I think, I don't know, we're both at a really young time in our lives. Whatever's going to happen in the next 6 months or a year, 2 years is going to be super exciting. Like,
oh yeah,
not even 10 years. Sometimes I'll tell people, like, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing the next 6 months, but I'm excited for it. So just even looking at the term of a year or 2 years, it's going to be incredible. And Jordan, oh yes.
Oh yeah. You see, you read, you got my mouth gesture. I was about to talk. So you pick up on that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, I've always been, especially we're coming up on this new decade, and I was like just thinking on New Year's Eve, like, imagine where we're all, where we're gonna be, because with a group of people, where we're gonna be 10 years from now, and just imagine how our lives will have changed, and all and it's like, I'm just really excited for everyone and my life. And but now, and then I was listening to Cal Fussman with Kobe Bryant, and the last question was, Cal went to this party where he, you show up as the person you're going to be 5 years from now. You dress as that person, and when you get there, you explain yourself, who you are 5 years from now. And so he asked, and this was January 2018, and he asked Kobe, like, so who, gave the context the way I just gave it, and said, who are you going to be 5 years from now? And he was, and as soon as he said that question, I literally just said out loud, God, that's unfortunate. Like this question, like, in hindsight, this question, Jesus Christ. Just tragic. And Kobe's like, just another curious mind. But so it's a shame that 5 years from that date, he doesn't exist. Like he's, he's gone. And so we very well could be too. So I like thinking out in a little shorter of time spans. Now, like you say, 6 months. But then again, we don't even know. So I've been asked before, oh yeah, I was in like class, like first day of class, like a few semesters ago, maybe like a year ago. And, like what's your goal for the semester? Everyone goes around and says what their goal is. And I say this all the time. I didn't just say it there, but I was like, my goal is to enjoy today. And people laugh, and I laugh with them, and I say it with a smug little smile on my face.
Oh yeah, as one would.
But but that's that's the goal, to enjoy today. We can imagine all that and fantasize about the future, that is likely to come to pass, but you're not sure.
Yeah, well, it's beyond important to enjoy that day. I was actually listening to a sermon right before I got on here with you about workaholism. My church is, really wonderful. I always have to stream it online because I'm not home, but they were talking about, the difference between just working hard and being a workaholic. And it was awful to hear because, while we have the sense of pride around workaholism, that it actually really damages you. And you can miss out on your life. You can miss out on your family's lives, just by always grinding your gears and always doing something, and how you need to take time to be there for yourself, be there for other people, be there for your family, because otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of being on your deathbed?
Yeah. Well, what are some of the characteristics of the workaholic? Did they outline that?
Oh
For
yeah.
example, like checking your email outside of work hours. Like, did they say stuff like that?
Yeah, well, they said I think there was 6 or 8 specific things they talked about, and actually, that's where I had to pause it. And I was like, I felt so guilty because I was like, I'm doing research on Jordan, thinking things out right now, and but a couple of them they did talk about. Some of the things they outlined was like one of them that hit me the most because I remember hearing it was like, do you work all the time just because you feel the need to? Because I literally told Sam Lister yesterday that I tried to be a 19-year-old for yesterday for a day, and I didn't do any work, and I was nothing but anxious.
I know what you mean.
I was like, yeah, exactly. Like, and they were asked, like, are you workaholic? Like, do you need to, like, do you feel a void, and do you need to fill it with work? Is like, because if so, you're kind of on this line. And I was like, oh, dang, like I told someone yesterday and that's the exact definition. And so I remember
me too. Void is the perfect way to describe it.
Like, otherwise, like, what am I supposed to be doing with my time? Like, I can't be on TikTok.
Yeah. However, okay, I felt that way, but until I had that little adventure in Israel for 10 days a few weeks ago, that I just realized how I want my life to be. Like, I didn't bring my computer, which was amazing. And I was on my phone instead of 3 hours and 50 minutes per day, an hour and 40 minutes per day. And the only time I was on my phone was like during like travel time, like going from like Jerusalem or Beersheba to Jerusalem or, wherever, whatever.
Yeah.
It was travel time that I was on my phone. So it was just being around people all day, doing awesome things like climbing mountains, and I didn't have any guilt, anxiety about not working. Zero. Like I didn't think about business once, and that was the first time since I started this journey that's happened in my life.
What do you think it was?
I think it was the environment and the people. It was just a really perfect storm, and not having my computer. Like like without you'll find a way to live. You might kick and scream in the beginning, but you'll find a way to make it happen. The same way you have to pay taxes. Like you'll kick and scream, but you'll do it.
You got to do it. Yeah.
You'll be in prison. So
is there a way that you've wanted to recreate your environment like that at home?
Right now, my excuse is like, I'm waiting to graduate in a couple of months, and
Yeah.
'cause I just don't, um, because I plan on traveling a lot more, and and I plan on not taking my computer, and like right now, I'm like tied to a location. Like I got to be back for school every week, so I
Yeah.
can't take these like extended trips.
Mhm.
So and it's like totally doable, and because like I set up someone, Julian, to run the business while I was gone, and so it's like it's totally doable. Like doesn't doesn't really require me all the time. So it's a work in progress. I don't really have a definitive answer to that right now. I
Yeah.
think I am going to figure it out over the next year. Yeah.
I think it'll be really, really, really fun. Like I haven't been able to, I have a dorm room and that's an environment, and I've been able to create like a corner for reading, a corner for working, a corner for sleeping. But I think it's going to be really fun to see what happens after you graduate, because
Yeah.
then you'll have a whole either house or apartment, or maybe a van. Like I've seen people just live in vans, and that's super cool.
Yeah.
Um,
I tell you what, I might be back in Israel real soon. Just going through the process right now, the application process. Um, I might be a volunteer as a teacher in Israel next year for the 2021 school year for 10 months. So I don't know. I remember like in elementary school, like thinking being a teacher would be like really cool one day, because I admired the really cool teachers, like um, like I can think of a couple of people in my school, like your father, like I just wanted to be like I wanted to be one of those cool teachers.
oh yeah, oh
That
yeah.
makes learning fun. Like I can think of Miss Ames and Miss Hughes in fifth grade. I can think of Mr. Grube in third grade, and then I can think of Mrs. the horrible Mrs. Moser in fourth grade. That just I like. She was equally as much of an inspiration to become a teacher too, um, because I don't want to be like that. Like I've seen both sides, and even in higher up in professors, I've seen both sides there too. So I think it'd be a really cool thing to do on a volunteer basis, and for not for 50 years, but for a year. Um, and I think just being back in Israel will be a perfect environment for just being me and living and experiencing, especially now that I have like friends in Israel too.
That's the best part. You just crash with them. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I think I come from a long line of teachers, and I've seen a lot of benefit in just being a good teacher, because
Mm,
you'll have those kids that you can really inspire their minds, or you see those kids, and maybe they're struggling for some reason, and a lot of times it's outside of academics. Like seriously, like I've seen my dad be a father to so many, right? Like, and it used to, and I'm not gonna lie, it used to bug me as a kid, because I was like, no, that's my dad. Like that's not your dad, that's my dad.
yeah.
But as I got older, you realize that teachers are second parents, if they want to be, and a lot of times they'll impact students in beautiful ways, not just in terms of academics, but in terms of figuring out life and
Mhm.
figuring out who they are. So being that for other people is one of the greatest things I think you can ever be.
I agree. My first personal training client many years ago was this. His mom hired me. He was this 14-year-old kid, and our friendship, the way our friendship has developed over the past 3 years, has just been amazing. And I can speak confidently in that. Like I've definitely been this big influence on his life, and it's just been like a really really fulfilling thing. It's really hard to describe without bragging too. I don't know. It's just been. I mean, it's been beneficial for both of us, really, and it would be really cool to. It's different than like the impact the podcast makes. It's way different than that. Like this is face to face, like human to human. You get to see it, so it'd be cool to do that times 20 in a classroom.
Yeah, it if you allow it to, it'll manifest in beautiful ways. It's awesome. And that's such a beautiful note to end on. Like, Jordan, I could talk to you all day.
I know. We do that every time. Yeah.
And we'll probably end up talking more after this.
Yeah.
But seriously, like, where can everyone find you? Where can everyone look up your stuff? And where can everyone get into contact with you?
Sure. Sometimes I'm feeling this way. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I say like, I'm not into that all that self-promotion stuff. But today, I don't know. You can find me at jordanparis.com if you really want, and you can find everything there. Everything will come from there. If you're really curious, you find the podcast there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for catching up, and thank you so much for coming on and imparting your wisdom and being really open and vulnerable. I find it such a huge benefit when guests can come on and just be really raw and authentic.
Thanks for getting the best out of me. You're a good asker of questions. And you go with the conversation. Like I've seen podcast hosts that do stick to that list of questions, and they hear your answer and they're like, okay, next question. It's like an interrogation. So this is great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this interview series. I would love to know some of your best takeaways. You can find me easily on LinkedIn or Instagram just by searching Ava Wettrick, and I'll happily get back to you and have a conversation. If you really enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave a rating in iTunes. That act will compound in ways that I can't even imagine. As you have just found a mentor here, go out into the world and see who you can be a mentor to today.